Hello everybody! Today we're going to learn how to replace the decal that goes on the tote for Stanley Sweetheart planes. If you've ever restored a Sweetheart plane, you know that there's a decal that goes on the tote. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if you could replace it, well, or put it back on, because most of the time they're completely gone. Well, I've been doing it for years. I make my own decals. They're available for sale if you're interested in them. We're going to take a look at how to do it. The first thing you'll need to do is either refinish your tote or prepare it for the decal. I did another video that you can find on my channel where I show you how to refinish a tote. But if you've got a tote that's got good lacquer on it, you just want to add the decal, then you just got to prep it. So you prep it pretty much the same way that you do in the refinishing the tote video that I did. I take that sanding sponge sitting to the right of the tote and gently sand the entire outer surface until it gets dulled, and you'll see it when you're doing it, you know what I mean. Then after the sanding sponge, you take either 3 or 4/0 steel wool and polish it up with that. Then you're ready to put your decal on. I sell my decals in sheets of 14 or individually. Individually they're $2 a piece, sheets of 14, $1.50 a piece. There are two different decals that Stanley put on these planes. One of them has Made in USA underneath it, and the other one doesn't. The one without Made in USA is the older decal, and pretty much your rule of thumb is the early decal would be found on the planes that had the type of lever cap that you see on the right, and the Made in USA decals would be used with the lever cap that you see on the left. You can also associate it with the trademark on the iron. You can look in John Walter's book on Stanley tools with the explanation of all the plane types, and you'll be able to see it there too. But it doesn't explain where the decals are used. So what I do is I go with the lever caps, old on the right and new on the left. If you need decals, the best way to contact me for this would be through my eBay listings. Second Chance Antique Tools on eBay. Send me a message and then we can get linked up to work out the details. My decals are sprayed with a couple coats of lacquer. That's to keep the ink on, and Stanley used to finish their totes and knobs with lacquer. If you use anything else other than lacquer, you may have a problem. First thing you want to do is get a good pair of scissors, good light, and good eyeballs, and trim your decals, cut them out of the paper that they're on. You want to cut right close to the edges. You don't want to have any white showing around the edge or they won't look good. That's the first step. Cut it out. The next step is to put your decal in some water, and you're going to let it sit there for probably about a minute. These are called water slide decals. If you've ever paid any attention to these things, they always go on the left hand side of the tote, and they're normally centered, but I've seen them all over the place. So I think some of the Stanley workers might have been celebrating St. Patty's Day a little bit too much at times. But you line it up over the center. It's not an exact science. You start to slide the paper off. I pull the decal off. I get the decal where it's supposed to be, and then I just pull the paper out from underneath it. It is a little bit forgiving. You can do some movement to it to get it centered up where you want it. You'll need a dry paper towel. Work from the center towards the outside, and you're pushing the water out from underneath it. Not real hard, just enough to get the water to come out from underneath your decal. After you've got it all dry, the next step is we're going to start coating it with lacquer. So I've moved over to my paint booth to apply the first coat of lacquer. I use Minwax Clear Satin spray, and the first coat's going to be a mist coat. I want it to be real light. all the way around, not just on the decal. The mist coat only takes a minute or two to dry, and then you do it again. Another light mist coat. That's it. So the second light mist coat is dry. It's time to put a regular coat on now. You just don't want to do it so heavy that it's going to run. What this is going to do is make sure that decal doesn't come off, and the lacquer actually feathers the edges in to where you can't even feel the decal anymore. So that's the third coat, a regular coat. So after 2 mist coats and 2 regular coats, it's time for the sponge sander and some steel wool. The sponge sanding is light, taking great care not to go through the lacquer and into the decal. So you go over the decal with it lightly, a little bit more aggressive, away from the decal, and you'll see the haze comes over the lacquer, and it starts to smooth out any little puckering or imperfections in how it was coated. That's the goal. So I finished with the sponge, and now I move on to the steel wool. Same thing. I start over the decal lightly around the edges of the decal, and a little bit more pressure over the rest of it to make it look nice and glassy smooth. And that's it. I've steel wooled the entire thing. You always go with the grain. And here's what she looks like. It is starting to look really good, but it's still not done. Now we're going to do 2 more mist coats and 1 regular coat. Then it'll be done. With the lacquer done, it's back to the sponge and steel wool for 1 final go over. Just like the first time, with the grain, nice and light. Should be a lot easier this time to have it smooth out. Careful over top the decal, the entire tote. Using a sponge sander, you're a lot less likely to sand through the lacquer because it conforms to the surface. Sponge sanding is done, and then it's moving on to the steel wool. With the grain, and the steel wool is kind of polishing it and bringing the shine back. And after the steel wool, this is what it looks like. That's a pretty tote. The only other thing I'm going to do to it is give it a coat of wax. And there it is after the wax. Isn't that a beautiful tote? So the original decal was missing. Put on a replacement, and that will probably stay on there longer than anything that Stanley put on because we've top coated it with several coats of lacquer. There's only one thing left to do. Let's put this old A5 back together again and take it on a test drive. I imagine you've all probably heard the old saying, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Well, behold. The A5's back together. The new decal is looking good. I'm going to show it off from this side. These A5s have a nickel-plated depth adjustment knob. And anybody that's ever had any experience with the aluminum planes, they know what they're prone to do. There you can see some scratches in the bottom. Lapping them out just would not make any sense. All you're doing is removing metal. The bottom right now is flat and it's ready to be put to work. Other than the scratches on the bottom, the only issue with this plane is that the iron is short, a little short, has some pitting, and I can't really get it into focus here, but the Sweetheart mark is there, but it's really weak. So you'd want to replace that iron. If you replace that iron, this would be a really good example, collector quality type A5. The 1 5/8 inch poplar's in the vise. We're going to see what this old A5 will do. Look at that. Piling up the shavings. It's really weird to have a plane that is so light, but it effortlessly cutting these 1 5/8 inch wide shavings that are see-through. I like it. I wanted to give you an idea of the kind of shavings that this thing makes. That's that decal we just put on. Can't complain, can we? So the new decal is done. The A5 is tested. It may not be the most common sense plane for anybody to use given how soft aluminum is. And usually you like a heavier plane for planing with. But I'll tell you what, there was no problem doing what you see right here. So if you collect Stanley Sweethearts and you need decals for your totes, I've got them. This was a successful job right here. The A5, it's going on eBay in April, early April. So anybody's looking for one of these, that'll be for sale also. So I hope you enjoyed the video, learned something about how to put decals on. Bye.